I have for you how I made a capote for my son. I'd made a capote for my husband originally, and it was time for my son to have one. So what I will have for you in the description box below is a link to the instructions I used to start with for my husband. And then I used those instructions for my son's capote, and I tweaked them so that we could get a little better fit and so that my sewing machine could handle it better. I used flat seams where I could. Then for the body and the sleeve of the capote, I used Buterick pattern 4483, and I made a hood change, and I used Kwik Sewing for Children, and I used the hood from here, enlarged it a little bit, tweaked it, you'll see in the video. So I'll show you how I cut it out, and then I'll go through some of the construction. The coat turned out well. It's gotten a lot of use, and I am pleased with the outcome. As always, I can see where I could make some improvements, but I feel good about how it turned out. My biggest regret is on the blanket stitching around the edge. It is coming apart. So I need to learn how to do that a little bit better, but it's just a decorative stitch. So it's okay. I'm being okay with that and happy with how the coats turned out. I hope the instructions and the videos are helpful to someone else making a capote, and I hope you have a great day. Alright, so I'm using the Buterick pattern 4483. It's to make a robe, and I'm laying the pieces out so that the seam that would be the side seam underneath the arm are together, and that seam will not be cut. The armhole will be cut in kind of a U shape, and I hope that this will help the fit be better over the shoulders and through the arm. So I've folded the blanket in half. I've placed the back on the fold. I've lined up the arm and the side seam for the front, and then there's a little width left over on the blanket so that this will be the overlap on the front of the capote, which I want to overlap more than what the robe pattern would be. Okay, so here's the back and the front pieces. Side seam that's right here. And I didn't cut that seam. I just cut the armhole. And then the front has a very wide neck because there's a lot of overlap that you want there. I want about 9 inches on each side to overlap. Okay, so now I have this small piece left over, so I'm going to use it to cut out my little bits. I have belt loops and a belt and the pockets. So the pockets are right here, okay, and they're a rectangle, and they are 9 this way and then 12, and then that allows you to fold them over 3 inches to do the fringe that goes at the top. That is ready to sew. I'm just going to sew along this fold, and then I can fringe it and sew it on. They're just a patch pocket. So that's the pockets cut out. Okay, so what I've done for the belt loops is I've cut a 2-inch strip of the blanket, and now I'm just going through and cutting 6 inches. And I know I want one in the back and one on each side. So now I'm just cutting out the belt. It's 3 inches wide, and then the length of the blanket, because you need to have at least 24 inches overlapping. And I'm choosing to cut it out of the second blanket. I could get it out of the scraps of the first if I pieced it, but since I have to cut this one anyway, I'm going to do it in one long strip to go onto the coat. Laid the sleeve out on the blanket. I folded it in half, laid the sleeve out, measured it so it's on grain down to the 6-inch point, and then it will just be straight as it goes down to the end of the sleeve. Okay, so for the capote, to figure out the hood, because I wanted to change it, I used this Kwik Sewing for Children book. Pattern piece number 19 is the hood for this. So I traced it out, and then what I did is I added 1 inch on the back and on the top of it. So this part in the front is where the fringe will be, so it's 3 inches added to the front. The neck I kept the same. I don't know if you can see that. The neck I kept the same. And I cut out 2, and then I sewed them together. I overlapped them by 5/8 inch, and I did a flat seam on it because of the bulk. Then I took the shoulders and I brought the front up over the back, and I did a flat seam again. So to help with the sleeves, I've gone ahead and I have marked with a little dot how far it's to overlap. So I'm going to take the fabric and overlap it, sewing the sleeve together with a flat seam. The sleeve ready to be inset. It seems to be fitting well, even though I eliminated that side seam on my pattern piece. So now to the sewing machine. Okay, so I've cut that piece off, which would basically be the first piece of fringe, and I folded it over, and so now I'm going to sew up the hood here to keep the fringe back. Then I can pin it into the neck around the bottom of the hood and sew it into the coat. Ooh, zigzag. Everything's the right way. We're going to just sew the hood onto the coat. And I'm just using about a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, I've figured out the pocket. How we want to do it is from the top we want to cut a notch that's 3 inches by 1/2 inch. 1/2 inch because that's my seam allowance, and that's how my kid's just gone from school. My blanket stitch is going to come down this side. And I'm going to put it on like a patch pocket. So it's going to be blanket stitched here and then come down. Placing the pockets and the belt loops. The best way to do this is to just try on the capote and mark where you would like them to be. Then lay down your coat and pin the pockets and the belt loops in place. Then take it to your sewing machine and sew them on. So now cutting the flap, it says it needs to be a 1 inch fringe. So I'm just going to make a mark at 1 inch and just go across.